Hello everyone, we're going to take a look at cruel sports today with our learning objective as to know why cruel sports were popular in the Elizabethan era. Taking a look at our two images we can see we've got a bull with some very sharp horns, we have a bear with some very sharp teeth and claws, and in both cases we have some dogs who are on the attack. Now looking into the background of both of these images, we can see loads and loads of spectators, and they are here to watch, to enjoy the fight, and to even gamble in some cases. The most popular form of entertainment in this time period when Queen Elizabeth I was around, talking kind of 1500s, 1600s, was the theatre. Hands down, this was the most popular form of entertainment, and it was extremely affordable. Every single person could afford to go to the theatre. It was extremely popular in terms of the plays that were shown. Robin Hood was a really popular one. Queen Elizabeth didn't like it too much. It encouraged people to break the law and to steal and give to the poor, but it was very popular among audiences. Now, if you were extremely poor, you can see this space in front of the stage, and this is a shot from the inside of the Globe Theatre. However, all theatres in the Elizabethan era looked the same. This area down by the stage, also known as the pit, this was an area called the groundlings, and these were extremely cheap seats to watch from. You would have to stand, and as you can see, if you look up to the sky, if it did rain, you would get wet. But they were great places to watch a production from, simply because you could communicate with the actors. It wasn't really like going to the theater today, where you sit very quietly and you listen to what the actors say. There was a lot of engagement between the audience and those people on stage. Now, there's another reason why the groundlings would be a very good place to sit, and it's the answer to the question as to why people needed to be so close to the stage. If you have a look at the shape of our theater, and if we were to look at it aerially, so from the sky, it's actually quite round, and we've got our stage here. Now, if you've looked at sound waves in science, you would know that if you have a square theater with a stage and you speak, your sound wave goes that way and it bounces back this way. And if you are sat way back in the corner, you're not going to be able to hear that extremely clearly. Now, the Elizabethans were very clever people. They knew if we make a theater that is round, you're never actually going to be all that far from the stage. The distance from here to here is much shorter than the distance from here to here. So they knew that, first of all, we'll be closer. But the more important thing is the way the sound waves would bounce. So they knew that if I'm on stage and I speak, my sound wave is going to bounce in all given directions, and everyone is going to be able to hear. So this is one reason why theaters were round. Now, remembering that this is the year 1500, 1600, so we're looking 500 years ago, we need to also look at why there was no roof. And again, electricity is a relatively new invention that we often take for granted, but there was no electric lighting. So the only way to have a play was during the daytime, when the sun would be able to light up the inside of the theater. Before we talk about the cruel sports, we need to know what it was like to actually live in the Elizabethan era, because their lives were incredibly different to yours and mine. Now, in the Elizabethan era, most people were extremely poor. And when we say very poor, we don't mean they had slow Wi-Fi, they had no Wi-Fi. There was very little money to go around, and these individuals would often eat food from charities or even off the streets from bins if they needed to. Most people did not have a healthy diet. They believed that actually eating vegetables was bad because vegetables came from the ground and the ground is quite dirty, so the best thing to eat is only meat. Now, poor people didn't have a healthy diet because they could not afford food to have. And a very common dinner for poor people was to go down to the market to buy one onion, chop it in two, and throw half of that onion in a pot of water and boil it. And that would be your very gross tasting onion soup that you would often have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Most people worked in manual labor jobs. Farming was the big industry in the 15 and 1600s, and most people would work as laborers on farms. Most people's homes were extremely small, they were cold, and they were filthy. A dirt floor, a mattress made of hay. It was a very, very poor living environment. And most people did have some form of military training. Queen Elizabeth said that every Sunday people had to practice their archery for up to 1 hour, because countries were always at risk of being invaded by foreign nations. So there was a lot of issues with who is Catholic, who was Protestant, these two religions that were very popular at this time, and countries were constantly at war with each other. Now, when we look at being poor, eating bad food, having a tough job, living in a very, very terrible home, and knowing how to use a weapon, most people would feel quite angry. They were very angry at their personal circumstances. And sometimes when we get angry, we don't really understand why we're mad. We just know we are angry. And we want to be able to take that anger out somehow. With a little chicken, you're dealing with a massive bear. This involved tying an animal down to a metal stake and setting dogs or humans to attack it. And we can see in this case, the chain has actually broken away. So we can see where the bear would have been tied down. The chain is broken under the bear's strength, and the bear is attempting to attack somebody outside of the ring. Now, much like cockfighting, people would place bets on which animal they thought was going to win. Is it the bear, is it the dogs, or the length of time the fight would take? Bear and bull baiting would happen in purpose-built venues, and this is an image of the Bear Garden in London. Many people often ask, how did they get the bears inside of the Bear Garden? And it's a really good question, because bears aren't an animal that are native to the UK. They'd be found in continental Europe in countries like France and Germany and Hungary. So bears were often taken as cubs. During hunting parties, when the mother or father bear was killed, there would be 3 or 4 cubs just left behind. And people knew that these cubs won't survive on their own, so let's take them into captivity and let's raise them in cages. Very quickly, people realized that we can use these bears for cruel sports. So as the bears are being raised, they're also being systematically abused. And they're going to be, poked with hot iron bars, they're going to be starved, they're going to be startled and scared to make them really aggressive and really angry. And that was the goal, was to have angry animals, because they would put on a better spectacle for people to watch. Having another look at bear baiting, we've got 2 images here. So another picture, again, we have the bear, and we can see they're shackled down, they're tied down, there we are, to a chain, and they're being attacked by dogs. Now, the men in the background here are to make sure that nothing gets too far out of hand, and that bear does not escape and be able to get within the audience. On the right, we have source C. Now, we've got the Globe Theatre. Many of you might be familiar with William Shakespeare. He was very famous for putting on his plays in the Globe. We've got the River Thames in behind, and we have bear baiting. Now, we need to ask the question as to why is the bear baiting garden so close to the Globe Theatre? And I need you to think of, why are all the shops in Wickham in the town centre? Why are the best shops in the Eden Centre? And the answer is quite straightforward, that all of your entertainment and all of your shopping is better in one spot. Many of you might have gone down to the shopping centre to get some new shoes from JD. And you go into the shop and you get shoes, and as you're leaving, you walk by Carphone Warehouse and you think, oh, you know what? I really need a new phone case. I'm going to run in and grab one quickly. And when you leave Carphone Warehouse, across the way is Krispy Kreme, and you realize, oh, I'm kind of hungry. I would like to go and get a donut. And as you're leaving, you walk by Specsavers and think, oh, you know what? I need some sunglasses while I'm here. When you have all of these different entertainments in one space, you get kind of impulse action, and you go in just because you're in the neighborhood, not because you need to get anything. The Bear Garden was quite clever. They built their facility close to the Globe because they knew if people sail down the Thames and they come to the Globe and realize, oh, it's full or there's no play on, they just might wander down to the Bear Garden. So having all of those forms of entertainment in one spot was really key to being able to make a profit. Here we have another picture. So we have the bull baiting, you'll notice the spelling is in Old English, bull baiting and bear baiting. And again, these two venues are going to be very close to each other to enable people to go to a bull baiting match and a bear baiting match in the same day. Now, cruel sports were cheap. This was said before, it'll be said again. Poor people had very few opportunities to go ahead and be entertained. They were too busy working on farms. Now, life expectancy was incredibly low. You were only expected to live to be about 30 or 35 years of age. Deadly diseases, lack of medical care, this meant people were looking for entertainment whenever possible. Now, to fully understand that, we do need to think in a little bit of context. So we'll try this in two ways. And the first way is to imagine on an assessment point test, you get your test paper back and you're really not happy with the mark you got. So let's say it's 2 or 3 below the target that you were expecting. Now, you feel quite bad, but if you look to your neighbor and say, what did you get? And they got an even worse mark than you feel a little bit better. It's kind of nice to know that someone didn't do as well as you, or someone did worse than you. When we think back to our Elizabethans, we know that they were quite poor, they lived in terrible housing, they had military experience, and they were really angry. And this picture shows it quite well. All these people in the audience wouldn't have a lot of money, and they wouldn't have a lot of spare time. But as they're watching this bear being viciously attacked by the dogs, they're saying to themselves, my life is pretty tough, but it's not as bad as that bear. And being able to take out some of this anger they had in their lives by going and watching a bear baiting match would help them to cope with the stress that they dealt with on a daily basis. So that's our look at cruel sport. You need to make sure you go back onto Show My Homework and complete your cruel sport quiz and submit those marks for your class teacher to have a look at.